Okay, so here we are with Chapter 4, Reporting Basics. And I hope some of you also take news writing down the line because that's where we really put these into action. Right now, we're just going to describe what it takes to do reporting on a daily basis. And the first thing we'll look at is where do stories come from? There's breaking news events, so things that happen, crime, accidents, fires, and you need to always be ready for these things. We were talking earlier about, can you be married and have children and do the job? Well, you always need to be ready, so they always need to be ready too. The bigger the story, the more you need to be on the scene. So you'd have your cell phone on all the time, and you've got to go to where the action is to capture it. So moving fast, and always having that cell phone with you. You are kind of married to the news for a while. Carry a camera, and that camera can be part of the cell phone at this point. Then there's scheduled events, and you can write about them beforehand, and that's called an advance or a precede or a preview. And you make sure the newsroom keeps a long-range calendar. At public radio, we used to have a wall with like a dry erase board and all the dates of things coming up. The Independent does it as well, or used to do it. You want to bone up on the history before you go to an event. I remember several election nights reading up on the candidates, just spending the whole day, and it was going to be a long night. I'd spend the whole day reading up as much as I could. Team up with the editors, photographers, and other reporters for big events. Usually it's too much for just one person to cover. Like election night, we'd all be spread out at different places. You also would have a photographer along because it's hard to take pictures and take notes. News releases. Some handouts are truly newsy. Some others get filed directly in the garbage can. Either, if you're going to use them, you want to remember, don't print them verbatim. Always indicate that where they came from and change up the words. Press releases are written like, and news releases are the same thing. Written to convince people of something or to promote something, not the job of a journalist. So you've got to get them out of their language and put them into journalistic language. And if you turn releases into a longer story, you want to verify the facts. Again, they're trying to promote either a product or an issue, and you need to be the fact checker on that. And if you use a quote from it, direct quote, say according to the release or in a prepared statement, so you're giving them the credit and also possibly the blame if they say something that's inaccurate. It's not you, it's coming from this particular source. Which brings us kind of to the next question. A reporter is only as good as his or her sources. So you want to select the sources for relevance. I think sometimes, it's like asking your hairdresser if you need to get a cavity filled. Don't do that. Go to the dental hygienist go to the relevant source for the particular topic that you're talking about. Just because they're an expert in one thing doesn't mean they're an expert in another thing. So look for relevant sources, and then check those sources for accuracy. Check their information out elsewhere, and balance your sources for fairness. If you know that this one source leans this way, find another source who leans that way. And cultivate your sources for tips. Always be gracious with them, thank them, give them your card, give them your email, give them your cell phone number, and let me know if anything happens with this. You want to be in contact because that's where a lot of the good, important stories are going to come from. The more sources you use, the better your reporting will be. Well, think about this for a second. If you've got more sources, you're going to have more depth to your reporting, right? They're going to say some things that even contradict each other, and you'll have to kind of wade through that and maybe have your audience wade through it with you. The story will provide more information and more insight if you've got multiple sources. It gives you a broader context, right? You're not just describing one thing, you're describing kind of the broader situation, and it's much fuller reporting when you can talk to more people about it and you get these different points of view on the same topic, and that's what you need to have full reporting. It's also going to be more reliable because because of these different points of view, you'll be able to kind of manage what the truth is within that. And if somebody says, no, that's wrong, and you go back to your first story and say, oh yeah, I probably misremembered that. That will help with the reliability in your reporting. So less chance of an inaccuracy or bias as well when you use these more sources. And where do these sources come from? Well, there's newsmakers, there's spokespeople, experts, again, right experts, official records, so documentation, something from the government, from the Cook County Courthouse maybe, reference material, And then regular people, ordinary folks, the real people. When I was an undergraduate at Medill at Northwestern in journalism school, we used to say, don't don't have an edifice complex. Don't just think that the sources come from these top ones in the buildings, right? But from people on the street, real people. Go out and talk to them. If you're doing a story on Chicago Public Schools, don't just go to CPS, right? The organization that runs the schools. Go to the teachers. Go to the, if you can get access to the kids, go to the parents. Ordinary folks are also a very big part of the story. So it can be a combination of that. Do not plagiarize. If you're using the internet, you want to be aware of all the dangers of the internet, right? That is the home of fake news, so we have to really verify. But one thing in particular, in addition to checking and verifying everything and looking for multiple verifications on something that you see on the internet, checking to see that it's updated, one major point here, and the rest are all in the book, and I think you want to be very smart in terms of how you use the internet. But one basic point, which is true everywhere, academics, don't plagiarize. Quote and credit the source. If you need to, you can rewrite it while crediting the source, or you can rework it a lot until the idea is more yours than it is theirs. But the best thing to do when in doubt is cite that source. Tell us where you got it from. That's going to keep you out of trouble. Observations are also a key part of the stories. You're there on the scene, right? Like we talked about, getting to the scene quickly. That's how you can bring the scene to life to other people. If you're writing rather than doing video, you can describe the images, you can describe the scenes, the sounds, even the smells, and you want to show, not tell. And that means instead of saying it was chaotic, that you show that cars had broken down, that traffic was stalled, right? You show us this rather than telling us this, and you bring your eyes there. Reporters are the actual eyewitnesses. You get to be the senses of the reader. Now, moving on to note taking. It's not easy. You've got to multitask to do it. So you're listening, you're interpreting, going, doesn't make sense. Doesn't make, I've got to ask more about this. You're getting ready to do follow-up questions. You're observing. You're also, watching how they respond, what they're dressed like, any other kind of information that you can put into your story. We call it color. You're evaluating, again, that this may not be good information, and you're actually doing the physical act of writing. And sometimes you're also making eye contact. I try to do that. Maybe while I'm writing I can't, but then I can look up at the very end. And you're thinking, ideally you're thinking, because you want to be on your feet, you're aware of what they're saying so you can do the right follow-up questions. And you need a system to guarantee that what you report matches the data your source gave you. So good notes are really important, and that might mean backing them up with a recorder. And so there's a lot in the text about this, and I really hope you look through it because there are some choices you could make. I honestly think a combination of note-taking and recording is good, but don't do lazy note-taking. Don't rely on your recorder because you need to be mentally present, alert, and be able to go through your reporter's notebook very quickly. They have a nice picture of the notebook in the textbook, so look at that, and they show you have a running log of the time, the speed of transcription. For that point, you want to skip the small words, right? So the thes and the a's can go. Abbreviate long words. Figure out Americans. You can say AM, right? But know what your symbols are. Carefully spell out important facts. And use the first free moment to review the notes. So after you might be done, you go somewhere in the bathroom and you go through your notes and you fill out everything. But you've got to do that to fill in the blanks so that your notes are thorough before you get to the newsroom. Choose a notebook size that's comfortable for you. A lot of reporters use kind of a thin, long notebook. Use felt tips or water. Use different colors for different speakers. That's optional. I think that can drive you a little crazy. Mark things that seem important. So think about how you do it when you're taking notes for classes. Do you put an asterisk? Do you circle? Do you underline? Whatever it is that you do that for your notes too. Be able to do it quickly because you'll be under deadline. You want to be, again, thinking on your feet. Draw lines to separate speakers. Use quotation marks around the quotes so you know what they actually said and what you're paraphrasing. Interviews come in all sizes and shapes. They can be long and formal, or a quick phone interview, or you walk around with your subject, maybe have them explain something. Well, if you're going through a factory, have them talk about how the factory operates. Or maybe you're just walking them down the hall like they used to do if you've ever seen West Wing, and it's an on-the-fly chat. You're just walking and talking. Or it's a backgrounder. You don't want anything on the record, which we'll just talk about in a second, but they don't want you to use that information and credit them, but they want to give you that information so you have a good starting point to tell the story responsibly. So tips for successful interviews: set up the interview, do your homework first, think through the story, and then determine the best way to interview. Is it going to be alone at their place? Is it going to be in a coffee shop? You don't do that if you're doing audio because you don't want the background noise. But where are you going to get the best information out of? Set up interviews, decide where and when to meet, ask if photos will be allowed, and then prep for it. Keep doing that research, organize your questions, and prioritize. What do you have to have before you can leave the room, right? If there's any question that you absolutely need the answer to, be sure that you get to that. Doesn't mean you get to it first, right? And you may, in fact, want to rehearse the interview so that you have it come up in the right time. If you ask, why did you beat your spouse? Too early on, you might not get the answer that you're looking for. I know, horrible example, but we always have these horrible examples. Arrive on time, dress appropriately, and then during the interview, relax, take some breaths before you get there. Be in charge. I've had many powerful people try and take the microphone away from me, and I want to hang on to it because I know where their mouth should be in relation to the microphone, and I want to be in charge of the interview. I'm the one asking the questions. But sometimes it's a fight. Start with the basics. Budget your time. Again, you want to figure, how much time you have with them. They usually are pretty upfront about that. And you want to be sure you're aware of it so that you get everything in. And then this is the idea of beginning with softballs. If it's somebody you think is corrupt or a spouse beater, you don't start out with that. You kind of, oh, well, thanks for being here. I even asked them what they ate for breakfast to test my microphone, right? So you build up a bit of a rapport, and then you get to the harder questions. Focus your questions. Don't make them too vague and abstract. Also, don't make them yes, no. Keep it simple. And like we said, limit yes, no questions. That's not going to help you. So open-ended questions, but that doesn't mean not focused. Get every question answered. So sometimes you have to ask it several times in order to do that. Ask follow-up questions. So listen while you're there. Stay flexible. The interview might go in a different direction. Ask people to slow down if you need them to so that you can write. Don't worry about asking a dumb question, and you can always frame it as, I'm asking for my readers. My readers might not be aware of it, so you can couch it so that you don't look dumb. But I think you need them to explain things in a very simple way for your readers, so it's good to have them do some of that translation. Look around, check out the environment. That can be very helpful for descriptions. Use reassuring body language, make it clear that you're listening. Use silence. Pauses can be incredibly useful. People don't like a pause. See, you didn't like that. They want to fill it up with something, right? So they'll fill it up with something. Don't interrupt, especially if it's audio, just nod. Don't take sides, right? Try and stay neutral in this like you do throughout the reporting. And then use the toughest question last. But again, watch the time so that you can be sure that you get to that tough question and don't leave the room without getting it. After the interview, you review your notes. You can review them with the interview. I would be careful about giving them the notes themselves. Do not do that, but you can go over certain points with them. But more importantly, ask who else you should contact, right? And sometimes I even get bold enough and I say, who disagrees with you? Ask permission to call later. You want to keep up and follow up if you have questions, and that's actually a sign of good reporting, and they might be more comfortable with that, knowing that if you have questions, you'll call back and ask the interviewees to call you. And then say thank you. Review notes again privately afterwards. Check back with them after the story runs. On the record and off the record. On the record means information can be printed. The source can be identified. Off the record information cannot be printed in any form. On background means you can use information, but you can't identify the source by name. Deep background means information can be used, but you can't reveal the source. Real words give stories personality, but be careful because people lie, they exaggerate, they fudge facts, they yammer, they stammer and blabber and ramble, and you just want to be able to use them. They're like the chocolate and the chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream, right? So you want to get them in there, the good stuff, or the raisins in the raisin bread is what we used to say in undergrad. They're the good stuff, but verify. So sometimes you want to use a direct quote. That's a speaker's entire sentence presents ideas in a relevant, concise way. A partial quote, when it's too long or awkward, generally I avoid those. Paraphrase when you can say it better than they can. And then capture dialogue. It's really interesting to capture conversations. So be taking notes kind of all the time. That's what we've got for you, folks. So we'll be up next with chapter number 5. Thanks.